Cape Town! I'm a little bit loud for my own good sometimes. How's everybody doing this morning? Thank you to YPO and The Edge for having me here today to discuss our newest project, I Am Jane Doe, and the issue of online harm. And a special shout out to YPO member Lorna Auerbach. Lorna was a major donor to this project, and but for Lorna, it likely never would have happened, and the impact that resulted, zero. YPO! So, this project started with a newspaper article, 2 inches by 2 inches, at the back of the Boston Globe, back of the Metro section, and it caught my eye. And the article went something like this: Jane Doe number 1, Jane Doe number 2, and Jane Doe number 3 filed suit against Backpage.com and the Village Voice, its parent company. And they filed suit to determine whether the website bore any responsibility for injuries they sustained by virtue of being sex trafficked at the ages of 13, 14, and 15 years old on Backpage.com. 2x2 article. And I remember reading this article and thinking, what the hell is sex trafficking doing 10 minutes from where I live? What's up with that? I had assumed this was a crime that was confined to developing countries. Number 2, Backpage. What's Backpage? Never heard of Backpage. Is this like somewhere on the deep dark web? Nope. Backpage.com was just a click away, hidden in plain sight, operating in almost every major country around the world, making hundreds of millions of dollars on an annual basis for commercial sex of all kinds, including that with children. And the third thing the article went on to say, Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3, who had been represented by able counsel, an international global law firm, Ropes and Gray, lost their case. And I remember thinking, let me see if I get this straight. How can it possibly be legal for a website to host advertisements selling children in the United States of America? So we then undertook to understand the breadth and the scope of the problem. In the United States, the Department of Justice estimates there's somewhere between 1.4 and 2.2 million children on the street at any one time. Foster care, homeless, runaway. 15%, it is estimated, of those children will be sex trafficked. So 15% of 2 million children in the United States alone. This is not a child here or there. This is a grave human rights crisis affecting our most disenfranchised children. On a global basis, the ILO reports that 40 million people on an annual basis are subject to human trafficking. And it's obscenely profitable. This crime generates about $150 billion a year on an annual basis, and 2/3 of that, my friends, $100 million, is attributable to sex trafficking. And where is it now? Online. So, I read this article, I do a little bit of research, and I jump in. Now, full disclosure, I'm an ex-lawyer. I know. A recovering lawyer, we like to say. And so I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be internet freedom issues here. We're gonna bump up against free speech issues. I'm gonna geek out on reading all these pleadings, and I jump in. And I actually call Backpage.com. I know. I was afraid. And I call the general counsel, Liz McDougall. And I had been warned about Liz McDougall that she was the sweetest, nicest woman, that I would literally want to go knit sweaters with Liz McDougall. So I call her, and she said, I don't want to talk on the phone. Will you meet? I'm coming to Boston. I said, I'll meet. And I met Liz McDougall, and she was the nicest, warmest. I literally wanted to take her home into my kitchen and bake Toll House chocolate chip cookies with this woman. She was like, Mary? And I was like, Liz? And she said two things. She said, we will be part of your project if you look into two things. We think the crime of child sex trafficking is wildly overinflated. Now, most advocates believe these numbers are the tip of the iceberg, underinflated. And I said, it would be journalistic malpractice if I did not, as part of this project, look into these statistics. Yes, we will do that. The second thing she said is, I hope you will be exploring the issues of free speech, which are profound. And I said, of course, I've been thinking about these issues myself. Then I have the opportunity to meet the children. Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3. There have been several other children across the country that had tried similarly to file suit against Backpage. Seattle, St. Louis, and I'll never forget, young woman, she was the first to ever file suit against Backpage, 13 years old. And when she was trafficked, she snuck out of the house to go to an after-school birthday party. Later that night, she found herself stranded at a fast food restaurant. And she's scared, doesn't want to call her mother. She's approached by a woman. The woman says, are you lost? Are you okay? This 13-year-old said, well, I'm not supposed to be out at night. I'm really afraid to call my mother. I don't know what to do. Woman said, I'll drive you home. Yep. 6 hours later, this 13-year-old child was advertised for sex on Backpage.com. Just like that. This young woman, it's now 7 years later, she's 21 years old, I fly to see her. And she said, I said, I'm looking into this project, I'm really troubled by these case decisions. And she said, you're asking me to talk about this issue. I have been spending the past 7 years trying to forget every single thing that happened to me. Why would I possibly do this? And I said, here's what I can promise you. I will do my damnedest to elevate and amplify your voice and your story so that those people in positions of power can actually do something about it. She looked me up and down, and she said, do you have a daughter? Yeah. Yes, I said, I have a daughter. She said, I'm going to do this for your daughter, and I'm going to do this for other people's daughters because this has got to stop. Now you go do your job, she said to me. Holy shit. It was like a gut to the solar plexus. And for the remainder of this project, I had the hearts and the wings of these children on my shoulders and felt extraordinary responsibility as a steward for their story that I needed to do something to help amplify what was going on. Meeting these Jane Doe children, for me, was a game changer. This was no longer an antiseptic legal argument. So it's January of 2016, we jump in, and Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3 have appealed their loss. And so we follow Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3 and their legal counsel to the First Circuit Court of Appeals in Boston, where they've appealed their loss. And John Montgomery is their lawyer, and he has won 2 cases up at the highest court of the land in the United States, the US Supreme Court. He's a rock star. So I'm a little bit of a natural-born heckler, and I'm like, okay, I need to tamp it down, tamp it down, tamp it down. And I'm sitting in the courtroom. First thing, there was a 3-justice panel. One of these judges, Justice Souter, had sat on the US Supreme Court, had retired and was sitting in here. So I'm thinking, great, we have a great legal mind who will be able to think thoughtfully about the issue here. Well, the first thing he says, Mr. Montgomery, he said, could you explain the difference between what a publisher might do to promote a Washington Days car sale and what Backpage is doing to promote a thriving sex trade? What the? Did did he just seriously compare these children, 13, 14, and 15 years old, to automobiles? I'm literally like, wanting to, boo! Couldn't do that, but I felt like I had gone down Alice in Wonderland, right? Some sort of rabbit hole. The second interesting thing about the hearing was everyone referred to the crime as the venture of trafficking, as if it was a legitimate joint venture, the venture. And I remember thinking, not one time was the phrase serial child rape or child rape ever uttered. Now, unsurprisingly, the opinion is rendered about 4 months later. Case dismissed. In a radical departure from some of the other cases across the country, the First Circuit Court of Appeals found that even if Backpage.com had participated in, profited from, was engaged in this crime, driving the getaway car, a co-conspirator, no liability. Case dismissed, Jane Does go home, Backpage scores again. Now, Backpage, at this point, operating for a good 10 or 12 years, hundreds of millions of dollars on an annual basis, had been on an extraordinary winning streak for 2 reasons. First, not only did they have a phalanx of well-paid, expensive lawyers, but they were protected by an internet law that was enacted in 1996 called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And Section 230, which is, by the way, similar statutes are enacted in different places around the globe, it provided that if you're a website or you're a bulletin board and you're hosting content, that you're not going to be held responsible for what others might come on your site and post. Now, this made a lot of sense back in 1996 when the internet was beginning, right? There was no way to manage large amounts of data. These bulletin boards didn't know what was coming and going. And remember, 1996, you had to dial up to get online. Took 10 minutes to get online. Crime wasn't happening online because it took too long to dial up. And so, fast forward to today. Technology has simply outpaced our regulatory framework. Today, there are all kinds of low-cost data mining tools and all kinds of other methods to effectively manage large amounts of data. Now, the second reason for Backpage's winning streak was the company they kept, its allies. If I were to ask you who you thought Backpage's strongest ally was, big technology company, just give a guess, shout it out. Anyone? Ooh, begins with a G, ends with Google. You get the prize back there. Google. Let me repeat that. Google and its various funded special interest groups raced to Backpage's legal defense, filing lengthy friend of the court briefs, and even worse, Google and its minions embraced Backpage as a technology company instead of the boiler room operation it was. Why? Because Google and its paid special interest groups are fully invested in a completely unregulated online ecosystem where the profits keep coming. Now, we're seeing the harm that's wreaked by Google and these other platforms today, right? We're seeing not only sex trafficking, online election interference, fake news, fake Gucci, opioids, and now algorithms that push out fake news, that push out false narratives. And these algorithms make this kind of stuff go viral. And that has the effect of suppressing the truth and suppressing free speech and undermining democratic principles. That's where we are. So, back to I Am Jane Doe. I Am Jane Doe comes out, and there's an avalanche of press. And I mean, it's like Cosmo, People, Esquire, a men's magazine, called I Am Jane Doe a gripping legal thriller. Now, in the middle of our project, a congressional investigation into online sex trafficking erupted. And what they found was pretty damning. And it's the reason that Liz McDougall ultimately declined to participate in the project. And they discovered that Backpage actually took ads, scrubbed the ads of any indicia of a child. So if a third party or a pimp or a trafficker put up an ad that said, fresh, new in town, schoolgirl, right? These are all code for underage child. The Backpage filters would scrub the term and serve up the ad. That's how egregious the participation and facilitation of this crime was. Now, I Am Jane Doe comes out, and we have the good fortune to have a congressional screening. Some of the most powerful members of the Senate saw the film, reacted appropriately, and started to work on a bill that would very simply say, if you're a website and you are knowingly facilitating the crime of sex trafficking, you can be sued by a victim or a state's attorney. You'd think that would be a reasonable, carefully calibrated response. Well, this bill gets filed in the Senate, and it was like a missile went off. It was like a bomb exploded. Google came out from under the carapace of its various funded groups, flooded the Hill, flooded Congress. This is the end of free speech. And it was amazing to see them go into overdrive. However, the bill passed the Senate amazingly on a bipartisan basis. Think about this for a second. In the US, there is gridlock in Congress, and yet this bill passed the Senate. Between Christmas and New Year of last year, heads to the House. All of a sudden, where's the bill? Poof, it's gone. Those at Google killed it. And the special interest groups killed it. And that was the amazing thing about this project. There was an ecosystem that grew up around the film. And at first, I have to admit, we were self-serving. You know, go to the movie theaters and pay your $10. Please give us 5 stars on I Am Jane Doe. Well, the ecosystem included an unbelievable, it was a ragtag collection of mothers, survivors, evangelical Christian groups, conservative groups, progressive women's groups, liberal groups, all coming together. They had never worked together. And the entire coalition was completely outmanned and outgunned by Google. In what I can only describe as a Hail Mary pass, this ecosystem was electrified. They weaponized themselves. And I started getting these calls like, the bill is dead, what are we gonna do? And I remember thinking, we? And the coalition was already in place. And so it was amazing to just be able to put these people together, and off they went. And in a single day, there was a congressional briefing. Hundreds of survivors flew in, went up and down the halls of Congress, shaking hands. We released a public service announcement with some American celebrities, Amy Schumer, Seth Meyers, that went viral that day. And 6 weeks later, and shockingly, the legislation, with some help from some House members and House leadership, was back on track. And fast forward to where we are today. There has been the president, now I don't agree with most of our president's policies, but that day he signed a bipartisan bill into law. And not only did that happen, but a 93-count indictment was unveiled against Backpage's owners. The CEO of Backpage, in exchange for a reduced prison sentence, handed over the keys, the passwords, and Backpage last year went completely dark. The site is down. Thank you, my friends. Thank you. However, the site is down because of the courage of Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3 and all the children around the country who agreed to be part of the film and their mothers who led their fight. We just were part of amplifying their voices. Now, I'm going to leave you with one thought. In the wake of the legislation, the tech community was foaming. They went crazy, and they are now turning to international trade agreements to export broad immunity for these platforms. You know, they are a wily foe. They tried to do this with the Canadian-Mexican agreement. We were able to intervene just in time, but they are now racing all over the planet. And it's going to take all of us to hold these platforms accountable. They collect, they monetize, and they police content. That is their business model. And their abdication of responsibility for real-world harm has been nothing short of stunning, especially for a company whose motto has been, "Don't be evil." So the film is now on Netflix in every language in every country, and I hope you get to see it. And for more about our work, you can Google us, 50eggs.com, or you might want to use another search engine. Thank you so much.